theyeshiva.net.
Good evening. I'm Sarah Ives, co-director of ECGS and JEP. I would like to welcome you to the second session of Leaders at Your Desk, which is a joint project of ECGS and Mahut, which brings you fantastic Jewish speakers. Rabbi Y.Y. Jacobson is one such speaker, probably the most famous religious speaker in America today. And he's definitely my personal favorite speaker. I met him as a teenager when I attended his classes in Crown Heights. It was actually meant for older women, but I went anyways. I was completely spellbound, and I used to sit writing copious notes and lots of questions. And at the end of each and every session, Rabbi Jacobson was very kind to answer them all. So if you have any questions this evening, please feel free to shout out, let us know your questions, and I am sure he will be up for answering them. So we know the topic for this evening is why celebrate Judaism in an anti-Semitic world. And as Rabbi Jacobson addresses this topic, I'm sure he will inspire all of us with his humor, his knowledge, and hopefully we'll finish this evening with a better understanding of what being Jewish is all about.
Thank you so much for your very kind and meaningful words. I really appreciate it. And I'm so thrilled to be here with you, so many dear Jewish students from all across Europe. It's really a great pleasure and a delight and a privilege to be here with you because you are our future. You represent the tomorrow of the Jewish world. I want to begin with a story, a personal experience that I had a number of years ago. I was invited by the Pentagon to deliver the keynote speech to the chief of chaplains of the entire U.S. Army. Once a year, the leading chaplains of the U.S. Army, the military, the Navy, the Air Force go on a retreat. That year was Hilton Head, South Carolina. And usually the religious keynote is presented by a priest, by a minister. Usually the keynote was Billy Graham, who for many years delivered the inspiring message. But one year, the chief of chaplains, a fellow named Douglas Carver, a Baptist, decided that he wants a Jewish speaker. And so I was invited to deliver the keynote speech. The title was Fear and Faith in Times of Crisis. It was really an incredible opportunity for me. Here I was, a Jew with a kippah, a yarmulke, a beard, standing in front of thousands of chaplains, the spiritual leaders of the U.S. Army, as I said, the military, the Navy, the Air Force, most of them Christians, all different denominations within the Christian religion, of course, Catholics and Baptists and Episcopalian and Protestants and Mormons, etc., etc. There were some Muslims, there were a few Buddhists, a few Hindu, mostly Christians. There were a few Jews, very few Jews. And truth be told, there was a lot of tension in the air. When I stood up, it was like they didn't know what's coming. What am I going to share with them? They were not used to this sight of a Jew, a Jewish rabbi delivering the keynote. But I did my thing. I spoke for an hour. They gave me an hour. I still remember, from 8 to 9 in the morning. And it was moving. It was powerful. It was a very special energy, a lot of bonding. Following which, Douglas Carver, the chief of chaplains of the U.S. Army, gets up and he thanks me. And I'm standing right near him. And he offers gratitude to me. And he turns to the crowd and he says, did you see how Rabbi Jacobson spoke with so much passion, with so much energy? This is how we Baptists give sermons, if you ever heard Baptist sermons. It must be that Rabbi Jacobson, myself, has spent time by the Baptists learning with us. And everybody started to giggle and laugh. It was, of course, a cute joke, basically attributing my speaking style to my education among the Baptists. And everybody is like laughing and giggling. And I'm standing there. And suddenly I'm feeling this Jewish guilt. Why am I feeling this Jewish guilt? Because baptism is a form of Christianity. And here he publicly said that I was basically educated by the church and in a Baptist environment. And even though he was joking, but I felt that it was a disrespect to hundreds of generations of Jews who tragically often had to choose if they're going to remain Jewish or they're going to die. Today, thank God, everything has changed. But for so many years, Christianity was so hostile to the Jewish people. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of Jews were massacred in the name of Christianity and their God. And Jews often had to make that most difficult of choices. Will I remain Jewish, loyal to Judaism, or will I die? And I felt that it was disrespectful and not honorable for me to remain silent in a democratic country in the 21st century, saying publicly that I was educated and inspired by the church. I felt it would be a spit in the face of my ancestors who sacrificed so much to be able to remain connected tenaciously to their heritage and faith. On the other hand, to interrupt a general in the middle of a speech goes with a lot of penalties. He may make me do 900 push-ups. I may be a slim and handsome and athletic guy, but 900 push-ups is not exactly my cup of tea. You can't interrupt a general in the middle of his talk. And also, he was joking. And in my mind, I was debating back and forth, yes to say something, not to say something. It took a millisecond, but you know those milliseconds where you have this inner conflict? And then at the end, I decided it's the proper thing to do. I'm representing the Jewish people. Jews fought for their Jewish identity so hard and for so many centuries and millennia. I should not let this pass. And with palpitations in my heart, I will never forget, I interrupted him. And I said, General, I'm sorry I have to interrupt you. I didn't learn it from the Baptists. Ultimately, the Baptists learned it from us, from Sinai. I was still afraid when the whole crowd, the whole audience, burst out into a thundering applause. And I couldn't understand why. Why are they applauding me? When he said that Rabbi Jacobson learned his inspiration from the Baptists, they giggled. When I said that it all began with us, it began at Sinai, they gave me this thundering round of applause. I couldn't understand why. And then it hit me, and I realized it. The non-Jewish world, for the most part, respects Jews who respect Judaism. They are embarrassed by Jews who are embarrassed by Judaism. The fact that I could stand up there and say, we brought God's message to the world from Sinai. We were chosen to be the moral teachers of the world, to help our planet become a place of goodness, decency, kindness, and compassion. The Jewish people were chosen to be a light unto the nations, to share with the whole world the divine values of Torah, our dedication to family, our dedication to charity, our dedication to education, our dedication to honesty, authenticity, to social justice, our dedication to philanthropy, our dedication to the ideals that all of us are one. All of us were conceived in love, and that the most important thing that God cares about is that we are nice to each other, that we are kind to each other. This is our mission, to revolutionize the landscape of planet Earth, to help all of humanity understand that their life has meaning, that there is purposefulness in their existence, that they are responsible, and that all of us have a shared vocabulary, the shared vocabulary of humanity, and that ultimately we are all integrated and whole. When they felt from me that inner sense of comfort with who I am as a Jew, it made them feel more comfortable in their own skin. The world respects Jews who love Judaism and respect Judaism. On the contrary, when I am embarrassed with my identity as a Jew, when I surrender to quiet desperation and I suffer from an inferiority complex, they too are embarrassed. It was an incredible lesson for me in my personal life, and I think it holds true for so many of us. We ask the question, there is anti-Semitism in the world. Why should I be Jewish? That's precisely why you should be Jewish. The fires of anti-Semitism represent the hatred embedded in the human spirit, because We live in a world in which there's so much chaos, so much fragmentation, and a lack of awareness and education of who we are, what we stand for, and how hatred is never the solution to anybody's problems, not of a society and not of individual. And therefore, at such a time, more than any time else, the world needs the sobering, calming, visionary voice of Jews who are saturated with the values of Torah and of Judaism to teach our brothers and sisters of all races and all nations and all ethnic groups and all backgrounds and all persuasions that we are all unified, that we are all God's children, that we must learn to get along and respect each other because every person was carved in the divine image and has infinite value. In a time like this, my dearest students, living a Jewish life, educating yourself with the ideas of Judaism, living and celebrating your Jewishness in your daily existence is not only a good thing because of religious reasons, but also emotionally, psychologically, physically, mentally. This is one of the best choices you could make in your life. Because let's face it, we live in a world where there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress, a lot of marriages which break up, a lot of depression, a lot of suicide. Even if you were blessed with a lot of privileges and a lot of great resources, the inner challenges of mental illness, of trauma, of personality disorder, of psychological anxiety, of emotional anxiety, and so much uncertainty that we face creates a very powerful burden on each and every one of our lives. And here is where Judaism comes in and can really come to the rescue. Because when you live a life like a Jew, there is something so stable about your life. You are anchored in values that are timeless and eternal. You continue a story that began 4,000 years ago. You realize that you're part of an unbreakable chain that began with Abraham and still continues vibrantly to this very day. Judaism gives us powerful gifts that allow us to experience every single day of our lives as meaningful. In a Jewish life, every crisis is an opportunity. Every obstacle is a challenge, and every challenge is an invitation to deeper growth and deeper awareness. In Jewish life, every person you meet, every experience you have, every situation you encounter, everything that transpires through your day or night is never random. It has infinite meaning and purpose. God has placed you right here, right now, giving you a mission to bring light into the world. In a Jewish life, you see yourself as an ambassador of the divine, an ambassador of love, light, hope, healing, empowerment, and redemption. You're not a random mutation. You're not a random, insignificant blimp on the surface of infinity. Rather, your life matters. Every moment matters. You are indispensable to the cosmic divine symphony in which each of us plays an indispensable part and makes an incredible contribution. Every single mitzvah in Judaism opens up vistas in our soul and in our psyche to align ourselves with infinity, to appreciate who we are at our core, to be able to live a life of powerful meaning. Many of us are afraid of our darkness, and even more so, we are afraid of our light. We often look in the mirror physically or conceptually, and we ask ourselves, who am I? Who do I think I am to succeed? Who do I think I am to make a difference? Who do I think I am to be gorgeous physically, spiritually? Who do I think I am to be amazingly successful? Who do I think I am to be happy, to be animated, to be joyous? Who do I think I am to be able to have the most amazing relationship? The most in the future, the most amazing family? Who do I think I am to be able to impact the world? And Judaism says, who do you think you are? You're a child of God. You're a manifestation of God's light and glory in this world. You're an agent of compassion and infinite love. You have all the resources in the world to be able to make a difference and to be able to live life to the fullest, to be able to suck the marrow out of every day. Carpe diem, the Torah teaches. Seize the day. I cherish Judaism because it allows me to be able to look at myself and never surrender to the voices of toxicity, superficiality, despair, insecurity, narcissism, jealousy, anger, trauma, frustration, envy, but rather to always be able to tune into the voice in me that says, you are a piece of infinity. You are a ray of God in this world. You're a fragment of Hashem. You're a chelik elikami mal mamish. You were planted here on this earth to be able to bring the world closer to redemption. You have a mission to play in order to help all of humanity create a world that is saturated with goodness, with kindness, with love, with ethics, with morality, with values that can help both adults and children of all races live a kinder, more compassionate, and meaningful life. My dearest friends, I'm going to conclude with this little story and then open the platform to questions. Feel free to ask any question you would like about what I said or what I didn't say. I see a few questions already came in. We have here on the Zoom a chat or question and answer button. You can click on it and insert your question either in question and answers or chat. I'm not sure what the difference is, but we'll figure it out and we'll take your questions. But here's a little story. So there's a famous African-American rapper. He's known as Puff Daddy. You've heard of him. And Puff Daddy, who's also a very successful businessman, a number of years ago got into trouble with the law. It was one weekend. Puff Daddy, Jennifer Lopez. It was a messy situation that really put him and her in hot water. And he needed a good lawyer to represent him. So he calls up one of the most popular and well-known lawyers in New York, a Jew, an observant Jew, a man named Ben Brafman. And Puff Daddy meets with Ben and he tells Ben, listen, I want to hire you as my lawyer. I'll pay you whatever you want, top dollar. You know, it's great. But there's two conditions. Condition number one is you have to give me all your telephone numbers. I need all your cell numbers, your private numbers. I have to be able to call you 24 hours a day. And one more condition, I have to be able to call you anytime, any day, any night. People who work with me and for me, I need access to all their numbers and access to them constantly, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Ben says, listen, no problem, but one correction. 6 days a week, 24 hours a day. He says, why 6 days? He says, Sabbath, Shabbat, I rest. I don't take telephone calls. I don't check my emails. I don't deal with business. I don't deal with my clients. It's 1 day dedicated to God, to my family, to myself, to my soul, to my people. It's a day of quarantine. This is before coronavirus. It's a day of quarantine. The anxiety and stress of life is put aside, suspended for 24 hours a day. We sit, we sing, we eat delicious food, we argue, we debate, we pray, we study, we sleep, we schmooze, we fabring, we enjoy each other. 1 day a week when we rest. Puff Daddy says, come on. For the money I am giving you, it's 7 days a week. Ben Brafman says, no, 6 days a week. I cannot deal with this on Sabbath. He says, what if it's an emergency? So Ben says, listen, it's an emergency, send me a fax. My fax machine is open. If I get a fax, I'll take a look. If it's a real emergency, I'll have somebody take care of it. He says, no. I need to be able to call you on the Sabbath too. He says, why don't you just get yourself another lawyer? He says, because I want you. He says, well, if you want me, it's 24/6. Puff Daddy says, nobody ever said this to me. It's 24/7. And Ben says it's 24/6, 24/7, 24/6. The Jewish lawyer was stubborn. He tenaciously clung to his heritage and faith and beliefs. And Puff Daddy had no choice. He surrendered and he said, okay, 24/6. They sign a contract, they sign a deal. All seems wonderful and dandy. I heard the story from Ben Brafman. The next Friday evening, he's standing in his home. He picks up a cup of wine to make Kiddush. And what happens? The phone rings. How many times do you let the phone ring before you hang up? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. The phone rings 4 times, 5 times, 10 times, 100 times. One of his grandchildren was counting, or one of his daughters was counting. 1,000 rings. Ben Brafman had the hunch that this is Puff Daddy calling him on Sabbath. 1,000 times the phone rang and he did not pick it up. Saturday night, Ben right away calls Puff Daddy. He gets on the phone. He says, Puff, did you call me Friday night? 1,000 times? He says, yeah. He says, well, I'm so sorry. I apologize that I couldn't answer, but I told you I'm not picking up the phone on Sabbath. And I apologize. What's going on? Is there an emergency? I'm calling you the first thing Saturday night. Puff Daddy said, no emergency. So he said, well, you called 1,000 times. I'm sorry I didn't pick up. He says, you know why you're sorry? You don't have to be sorry. He says, well, you needed something, no? He says, no, actually, I owe you a big thank you. He says, what's going on? He says, I made a bet. He says, what type of bet? So I'll tell you, when I came home from the meeting with you, I met with my friends. We were talking. And I said to them, I met this observant Jew who keeps the Torah. And he tells me he doesn't pick up the phone on Sabbath. And he will refuse to make a deal with me if he has to answer my calls on Sabbath. And my friend said, nah, he was just lying. He's a con artist. He's not real. It's just a business ploy. It's just a way of getting more money out of you. What do you think? He takes it serious? And Puff Daddy says, I told my friends, no, you don't know these Jews. They're very sincere. And they're saying, nah, it's just an act. It's a facade. The guy doesn't believe it. He just wants your money. This way he can get more money from you. And I said, you know what? I'm going to call him 1,000 times on Sabbath, and let's make a bet. If you guys are right, if he picks up the phone, I give you 10 grand, $10,000. If I'm right, you give me $10,000. He says, Friday night, I picked up the phone and I rang 1,000 times. And you know what? You didn't pick up. You just gave me, they owe me $10,000. Thank you very much for not picking up the phone. I made another $10,000 fast. You see, my dearest friends, when you have real values in life, when you're anchored in an absolute system of right and wrong, first of all, it provides stability. It provides safety. It provides such a strong foundation in a world of chaos. It is so healthy for a future family life. It is so good for children. And most importantly, you become a person who is trustworthy. You become a living example for the whole world of what it means to be a human being who is anchored in faith, in love, in absolute values that are unbreakable, that are indestructible, that have sustained us as a people and as individuals for 4,000 years. People realize that you are part of a conversation of eternity, that you are continuing a narrative of eternity. It gives your life a different type of meaning. It gives your life a different type of stability. It gives your life a different type of clarity and sense of purpose. And it also allows all the people around you to see you as a source of inspiration, of hope, and of empowerment. My dearest European students, the world looks at you and the Jewish world looks at you. You are our future. You are our hope. You are our dream. We love you. We cherish you. We believe in you. I want each and every one of you to take that torch that has been handed down the generations for 4,000 years and continue to brighten up your lives and the lives of your communities and your families and the lives of all of our people and the lives of all of humanity with the values, with the love, with the authenticity of Torah and of Judaism. You can make the difference. Thank you very, very much. Okay, let's go to the questions. Question number 1. I could begin reading the questions, right? Mrs. Ives?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we can go ahead. We have also a question that came in by email just right before. If you got it, I'll check now.
Perfect. From the little Judaism that I know, it seems that we are stuck with many primitive customs, like wrapping the tefillin for men or lighting small candles on Friday evening for the women and the girls. Do we really believe in 2020 that this is how we should serve God and bring light to the world. I love you and I love your questions. But I think maybe you could look at it from a different perspective, okay? You may look at tefillin and say, primitive, weird, archaic, lighting Shabbos candles, how is that going to help anybody? Haven't you heard of electricity? Why don't you just click the switch and you'll have light in the house? And then you're going to start lighting Hanukkah candles. Put on light and you don't need Hanukkah candles, etc., with so many other mitzvahs. But I just want to give you a little perspective. Okay? The world has been saying, and from the day we started to celebrate Shabbos, the cultures, the empires, the powerful tribes looked at the Jewish people and said, what are you guys doing? These archaic traditions, this food is kosher, this food is not kosher. Maybe in the desert you needed some hygiene, so you figured out not to eat certain foods. But we're living in 2020. This question has been raised, and we have been challenged with this question literally for 3,500 years. And I want you to think about one thing, and that is, who asked these questions? The most powerful nations, cultures, and empires of the time. We are the Egyptians. We are the Philistines. We are the ancient Assyrians. We are the ancient Babylonians. We are the ancient Greeks, Romans, Byzantine. Where are they? Where is Titus? Where are the pharaohs? Where's Vespasian? Where's Nebuchadnezzar? Where's Caligula? Where's Adrian, Tiberius? Where's Julius Caesar? Where is Pompey? Where are they? The answer is they are in Wikipedia. They are in Wikipedia. You could check them out right now as I speak. We are the Jewish people, that tiny little nation, which almost was always subjected to some other genocidal decree, savage suffering, persecution, and obliteration. We are the Jewish people. The answer is we created Wikipedia and Google and Facebook and Instagram and Telegram. How did we do this? What did they have that they didn't have? Why am you and I having this conversation today in 2020 in Europe, this day, Tuesday evening, or here it's Tuesday afternoon? Why are we having this conversation? How are we having this conversation? And my dearest students, the answer is the tefillin, the Shabbat, the Torah, the mitzvahs, the Jewish precepts, our celebration of Jewish life day in and day out, that we studied and observed and bequeathed to our children, that allowed us not only to survive, but to thrive. So you may look at some of the mitzvahs and say they're weird, they're strange, they're archaic, and I completely empathize with you and I understand you. But don't underestimate their spiritual power. They are our link to eternity, because countries the other nations had larger than ours, armies more powerful than we did. They had language and they had culture and they had magnificent art and infrastructure and architecture and poetry and prose and theater. Who did they have? They had all of this. What did we have? What did we have? What is the one thing we had from the day we became a nation until this very day? What has accompanied the Jewish people over the last 3,333 years? Through thick and thin, in tranquil times and horrid times, in moments of prosperity and during times of poverty and persecution. One thing accompanied us, and that is Yiddishkeit, the Torah and the mitzvahs. That has accompanied us literally from Sinai to this very day, wherever we were in the world. From Odessa, from Ukraine to Hungary, from Australia to England, from all parts of Europe to South Africa, from North America to South America, from Jerusalem to Paris, and from Tokyo to New Zealand. The Torah and the mitzvahs have accompanied us throughout all of the years of our exile and the diaspora. We were in Israel, outside of Israel, in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, Southern Europe, Asia, and all other parts of the world. That has been there with us. And if that's the one thing that has been there with us, it's important to say, wow, there may be some power here. that I may not appreciate. And that power is essentially the gift of eternity. The fact is that Jews who clung to Judaism remain intact to this very day. We are still here, despite the incredible suffering. And this is, to me, this is extremely inspiring. When I pick up that Kiddush cup Friday night and I see my wife and my daughter lighting the Shabbat candles, I feel connected to 3,000 years of Jewish history, which are coming to life right here, right now in my home in 2020. That is an incredible phenomenon. Generations of your ancestors. And it's only because of them that we are here and we actually bring them to life and we connect to them. Next question. The growing anti-Semitism in the world, and especially by us in Europe, I live in England, made me think that perhaps we do encourage this hate by always sticking out and being different. Do you feel that we are sometimes an arrogant minority?
Hey, Rabbi Jacobson?
Yeah.
In the chat, I see someone posted a little bit longer piece that is related to this. Maybe we could read it and answer both of them together.
Sure. Let me take a look at the chat right now. Okay. Great. As a secular Jew, I know from my own experience that most of the people that I meet actually think about religious Jews when confronted with the concept of Judaism. They somehow think of Jews as religious. It happened to me, and I had to explain to them that most of us are not religious. Most Jews are secular, but we're all Jewish. People, if at all, know very little about the Jewish world. They have certain stereotypes in their heads about Jews. One way to work against anti-Semitism, in my opinion, is to break these stereotypes by explaining and showing that actually most of us are secular Jews, and we live amongst our neighbors who are not Jews, among society. This was actually already a fact before the Holocaust, but it didn't help us to be saved from the horrors of the Second World War. Hasidim and secular Jews were both sent into the gas chambers equally. When it comes to religious Jews, people see them as self-isolating, inculcated in their own cocoon. They live in their own world, and partly this is true. How can religious Jews contribute to the fight against anti-Semitism, and are they interested at all in doing so? Okay. These are all great comments, and thank you for your honest and candid feedback. And I'll be equally honest and frank with you. The idea that if Jews assimilate and we maintain a very low profile and we don't stand out as Jews and we intermarry and we make believe we're non-Jews, and even if we want to say we're Jewish, but we're not, we don't stick out, we keep to ourselves, and this will cure the venom of anti-Semitism. This is an idea that has been proposed for thousands of years. Jews in every generation thought this is the logical way to go. They hate us because we're different. If we can only show them that we're more or less the same, we're not really that Jewish, ultimately the fires of anti-Semitism will be extinguished. I don't know how to say this more bluntly than with these words. I do not know of more tragic mistakes than this one. I believe this is one of the most tragic errors that so many good and innocent Jews have made in the past and make in the present. Never throughout our history has assimilation and maintaining a low Jewish profile ever helped the Jewish world. On the contrary, the country where Jews assimilated most effectively and successfully was Germany. Do you know that in Germany, Jews were more German than the Germans? In the mid-1800s, almost half of Berlin Jewry converted to Christianity, not under duress. They did it with consent and with volition. They married out. They were unbelievably loyal to the German Kaiser and the German Empire. They fought for the country. They produced some of the greatest personalities that were the glory and pride of German culture in terms of science, in terms of philosophy, in terms of music, in terms of ethics, in terms of art. They occupied a very significant position as the PhDs that came out from the most cultured and sophisticated nation on earth. And yet, From that country sprung up the worst venom and hatred to the Jewish people, unprecedented in the annals of Jewish and human history. And no, it was not only the the Hitler and the SS. Some of the most respected German philosophers and thinkers, directly or indirectly, were part of the genocidal plan, as Daniel Goldhagen showed in Hitler's Willing Executioners. The Lubavitcher Rebbe once wrote to somebody who remembers Martin Heidegger. Martin Heidegger was considered one of the most celebrated philosophers of the last generation, who eagerly joined the Nazi party with such enthusiasm, despite being one of the greatest philosophers of the time, and remained a respectable philosopher. It's important to note this, because if you study Jewish history, you will see. In Russia, so many Jews assimilated. In Spain, in the earlier years, in the 13th and 14th century, many Jews assimilated. It never extinguished the flames of anti-Semitism. Look today. Today, as you said, most Jews are secular. You would think, why do they hate us? The answer is as follows. Anti-Semitism has nothing to do with Jews. You could change your nose. You can do cosmetic surgery. You can intermarry. You could make believe you're more Gentile than the Gentiles. It never helped and will never solve the problem of anti-Semitism, because anti-Semitism is not coming as a result of what Jews are doing or not doing. Anti-Semitism is the dysfunctional life and distorted set of values and beliefs in the heart of the anti-Semite. And you can jump off the Brooklyn Bridge and many other bridges 1,000 times and make 1,000,000 somersaults and tell the world, I'm normal, I'm secular, I'm not like those weird, strange, religious, Hasidic, fundamentalist Jews. We're from the normal type. We're just good people. It's a fallacy. It's a tragic fallacy. It never helped and it never would help, because the anti-Semite feels in the essence of his being that a Jew is a Jew is a Jew is a Jew, even if you call yourself a left-wing, liberal, progressive, open-minded BDS supporter. And one of the most leading figures in Black Lives Matter, despite so many people spewing anti-Semitic statements, and it's a pity because they're damaging an organization that has so many important values to teach the world. Even those Jews suffer from terrible hatred. And in a moment of reckoning, in a moment of truth, no Jew is ever emancipated from the hatreds of anti-Semitism. You know what the solution for anti-Semitism is? We must stand up to anti-Semitism. We must fight it. But the ultimate people who have to cure anti-Semitism are the anti-Semites. We have to protect ourselves. We have to stand together in ultimate unity and determination and decisiveness and resolve and absolute courage against hatred and the manifestation of hatred in any form. But if anything, it's the other way around. When Jews live as proud Jews, they earn the respect of much of the civilized world. When Jews hide their Jewishness, when we make believe that we're not so Jewish, they actually mistrust us. And it exasperates the hatred. So never be embarrassed about who you are. Be proud. Of course, in an environment, in a neighborhood where there's a lot of anti-Semitism, you have to be careful. But anti-Semites hate religious Jews. They hate secular Jews. They hate right-wing Jews. They hate left-wing Jews. They hate liberal Jews. And they hate conservative Jews. They hate Jews with black hats and Streimlach. And they hate Jews with kippahs and without kippahs. And as you said very well, the gas chambers were filled with the most religious Hasidic Jews and with the greatest socialist left-wing atheistic Jews. There was absolutely no difference. We're all one. We're all brothers and sisters. And the anti-Semites hate us all equally. The difference is when you're proud of who you are and you know who you are, you don't live a life of ambivalence. You don't raise your children with uncertainty. You don't live a life of conflict, and you inspire clarity. People know who you are and they ultimately respect you. Versus when we're embarrassed with our Jewishness, I think It only makes people more suspicious of the Jewish people, and they actually feel that they can't trust the Jews because there's a secret conspiracy. They're trying to take over the world from within. And that's why, look at history, you'll see assimilation never, ever solved anti-Semitism. Are there Jews who are arrogant? Of course there are Jews who are arrogant. Are there Jews who misbehave? Of course there are Jews who misbehave. And there are Puerto Ricans who misbehave. And there are Italians who misbehave. And there are English who misbehave. And there's people of all nations and cultures who misbehave. But only for the Jews do we have to make gas chambers. And only the Jews does Iran say Israel has to be obliterated in one day and 7 million Jews have to be killed in one day. And only Israel is selected as the quintessential apartheid state. Israel is the one guilty for genocide. This has to do with the behavior of one Jew or another Jew. This is the dysfunctional hatred that resides in the heart of the anti-Semite. You don't be apologetic about your Jewishness. You are not guilty for anti-Semitism. The anti-Semite is. Next question. As I hang around the Chabad Center and meet rabbis or boys of Chabad, I get a feeling that Chabadniks are sometimes a little or very obsessed with their Chabad things, with their campaigns, their mitzvahs, their rituals, their Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I'm somewhat traditional. And I do know there are many currents and streams within the Jewish world. And it seems like Chabad feels some exclusivity to themselves. I mean, they help everyone. They serve communities. But it feels like they feel that their views are the only right views to the exclusion of all others and above others. How do you explain this? Listen, Chabad is comprised of hundreds of thousands of Jews. Just like we spoke about Jews, Jews, there's 50 million Jews, and every Jew has their own way of looking at the world. Chabad is a very, very large movement. It has hundreds of thousands of admirers, of disciples, of ambassadors, of students, of people who are connected to it, maybe millions all over the world in all the Chabad houses. So I'm sure there's so many different types. I'm sure there are people who make mistakes. I'm sure there are those who need to work on themselves and be refined. What I could share with you is, as a student of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, who grew up in the environment of the Lubavitcher Rebbe during my youth, I could share with you, I think, pretty decisively and from a place of authenticity and clarity what the view of Chabad. The mission statement of Chabad is to be able to see the divine, infinite value in yourself, in every single Jew, in every single human being, and in all parts of the world, to be able to reveal the harmony and the unity that we share as a people and that all humanity shares as God's children, and really that all the world shares. The mission statement of Chabad is to accentuate the divine potential in each person and to train ambassadors of light and of hope and of goodness and of kindness and of healing. The mission statement of Chabad is to inspire every Jew to be able to come closer to his or her inner relationship with God through Torah and mitzvahs and bring the world closer to redemption. The Rebbe was an individual who empowered a generation to be able to look at the world this way and to be able to behave this way. If a Chabadnik in his individual life is arrogant and sees himself or herself as the only authentic Jew to the exclusion of all others, I feel bad for him. I feel bad that he or she is not living up to the tremendous visionary love that the Rebbe inculcated into so many people. Never to be judgmental, to be able to see the goodness in people. And the more you're connected to your own soul, the more you could see the soul in others. The moment it becomes about a club, it's my party to the exclusion of others, you're really missing the point. That's how I see it. I appreciate you bringing this up because I think it's very important. The corona crisis is bringing so many catastrophes to the world. How can we be positive when everything in our lives has been turned upside down? The world is becoming completely different in a negative way. What does God want from us? Excellent question, students. You're the best. I love you. Wow, I love your questions. Excellent. I'll tell you how I see it. Every crisis is an opportunity. Every obstacle is a challenge that is here to make us grow. Yes, the coronavirus is a great challenge. It has caused so much suffering, illness, death. I have lost friends, mentors, neighbors, teachers, relatives, as many of you have. We have seen people suffering. There's a lot of uncertainties, an economic crisis, etc. But as Jews, we have a story that started 4,000 years ago. We are not new on this planet. We have been around a long time, and we've been through very difficult challenges. And the secret of our resilience was that we knew that in every single moment, there is an opportunity to find purpose and meaning and to grow from the situation. So I say to you, instead of being pessimistic, fill your hearts up with hope. The world is becoming better and better. The coronavirus is challenging each and every one of us to go into our own lives, to retreat from our public life, to go into quarantine, and to reevaluate our priorities. You know what? During a time of corona, your relationships with your spouse, with your siblings, with your parents, with your children, I don't mean only you students, I mean all of us, can become worse, but they can also become so much better. Your relationship with yourself can become so much deeper. Your relationship with your God can become so much more authentic. Identifying what you really care about, what you're ready to fight for. This is the opportunity of Corona. In times of crisis, we are given the gift to crystallize who we are and who we are not, what we believe in and what we don't believe in, what we're ready to fight for and what we're not ready to fight for, what are our deepest values and what are facades that we're happy to shed. Remember, when everything is dandy and wonderful and we're traveling everywhere and we're distracted by so many different types of attractions, the clubs are open, the bars are open, the theaters are open, the stadiums are open, the malls are open, and the whole industry of entertainment is saturated with so many distractions, really, we don't have an opportunity to ask ourselves real questions. Who am I? What do I believe in? What am I ready to sacrifice for? What are my real values that I'm ready to fight for? But now, when we don't have a lot of these distractions, we are given a gift to ask and answer these questions. And you know what? I find that so many people are growing from this experience. So utilize this opportunity and see it in a positive way. It's our choice. This is an opportunity to teach yourself and to teach humanity. We are supposed to be a light unto the nations, an opportunity to teach people how to get along with each other, how to cherish each other. The shared language of humanity. We're responsible for each other. We have to care for each other. We have to be decent, compassionate, and loving to each other. Our lives are purposeful. We all inhale the same oxygen. We are deeply connected and integrated. This is a time to change your paradigms and start living and operating on a much deeper level of consciousness, a conscious of spiritual oneness, a consciousness of deep harmony, a consciousness of clarity, and a consciousness in which you align yourself with your infinite potential rather than with your toxicity and your insecurities. So I see this as great, great opportunities, blessings that are disguised in the crisis that we can and will excavate and bring out from the midst of this darkness and create a new generation of much more depth, wisdom, light, love, and blessing. I hope you don't think I'm naive and I'm living in La La Land, but I really believe that this is our role as Jews. And the greatest demonstration of this is look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. You're not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be here. Trust me. My grandfather was arrested by Stalin's KGB, sentenced to death, and then exiled 25 years in Siberia. He was supposed to be dead. I was not supposed to be here. You were not supposed to be here. We're here because there is a story in history that transcends the ordinary story. That's the story that the Jewish people bring to history. Don't let go of that story because it's a story of unbelievable hope in the face of challenge and adversity. It's an incredible, incredible story, and you are the one who represents that story. Don't let go of that story because humanity needs it today as much as any other time, perhaps more than so many other times. Let's go to the next question. I am reading in chat, right? In chat, I'm looking at the next question. Perhaps we can add that the hate comes from the feeling that we're not being sincere. So if we become more proud Jews and more proud in our Judaism. We're solving the issue, and we gain more respect as you did, as you said, because they will feel we are sincere. Okay, great. I think it's also interesting that in the face of danger and despair and death, many of us who initially have been secular confess to their origin of being Jewish. The fact is, Jewishness is at our core. When we are pressed to the wall and when we face challenge, usually it brings out deeper parts of your identity. That's the fact. Whenever you're challenged in life, deeper resources come out. So the fact is that, what do they say? No atheists in the foxholes. At moments of crisis, you see the core of Jews. It's called the Pintele Yid. Yeah. Great question. How do you practically progress in your life as a Jew? And I would say three things to begin with. Number one, dedicate every day between 5 and 20 minutes to study something of Judaism, Torah. It can be a book, it can be a website, it could be listening to a class, it could be reading an essay, it could be reading the Torah. Find something that speaks to you. Maybe if you can get a teacher or a colleague or a mentor, even 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day. Simply create awareness, expand your horizons. They once asked a Jew, what's the difference between ignorance and apathy? And he said, I don't know and I don't care. When you don't know, you don't care. It's important to be educated. Enlighten yourself. Learn about your values, your history, your heritage, your faith. That would be number one. Every single day, try to dedicate a few minutes a day. Of course, if you could spend more time, that would be awesome. And if you could take, at some point, a few months off and go study in a Jewish institution, in a yeshiva, in some Jewish center of learning in Israel or elsewhere, that would be an incredible gift for a lifetime. Even if you want to remain a secular Jew, but to be educated, to know who we are as a people, that would be incredibly powerful. Number two, I would say, try to do one Jewish mitzvah daily. If you're a man, wrap tefillin, give charity, whether a man or a woman, give charity. Say a prayer, say the Shema. When you wake up in the morning, there's a beautiful prayer that we say, Moda Ani. We thank God for returning our soul to us for another day and trusting us to be his ambassador for another day. It's a beautiful expression of gratitude. It takes around 30 seconds, but it's a great meditation to start your day with. In the Jewish prayer book, there's beautiful meditations and blessings we say in the morning. So wrap tefillin, give charity, say a prayer, do some meditation. Try to do one Jewish thing, a mitzvah, a day, even if it's just a few minutes. And the third thing I would say to you is, and I like to add, comes Shabbat, make Kiddush on Shabbat. Try to celebrate the Shabbat. Put a mezuzah on your door. Fix a mezuzah on your door. Light the Shabbat candles. The girls and the women light Shabbat candles before Shabbat. If you're living alone, men do it as well. If my wife goes away for Shabbos, I also light the Shabbat candles. Even if you're not observing the Sabbath, but you could still make Kiddush on a cup of wine. You could still enjoy some delicious Shabbos food. So try to start introducing values and mitzvahs and practices of Judaism into your life. And if you need guidance, speak to a rabbi near you or a friend or a Rebbetzin or somebody who can give you ideas based on your life and your lifestyle. It may not be very complicated. It may be very simple. The third thing I would say is to start realizing your power to influence other people. Try every single day to bring love and hope to one more person. Before you go to sleep, ask yourself, what have I done today to bring more light and love to the world? It could be a text. It can be a WhatsApp. It can be a post. It can be an email. It can be a telephone conversation. But ask yourself, what did I do today to bring more love and more light to the world around me? Every single one of us has an incredible power to influence others in a positive way. There is one teenager whom you can save. There is one friend or colleague or relative or stranger whose face you can brighten up, whose heart you can inspire, whose soul you can ignite, whose mind you can empower. Do it. Seize the moment to exercise your influence. Don't look at yourself as just an isolated, insignificant European college student or university student trying to get your degree and finish your exams and get on with life and get a job and move into another apartment and get yourself settled. That's all great and good. And I wish you the greatest success, and we hope to hear great things from you. But remember, in this process, you are an ambassador of God and the Jewish people. Every day, do one act that helps another human being, Jew or non-Jew. This is what a Jew does every single day. These are the three things I would suggest to you. Study Torah every day for a few minutes. Add one mitzvah of Judaism into your life. And every day do one act that helps another human being physically, psychologically, emotionally, financially, socially, or spiritually. I take the next question. I'm going to take the next question in the chat. Next question. How can I not be obscured by the exile of the Jewish people? And how can I remain attached to God? Okay, that's a beautiful question. And the answer is, it's always about your attitude and your awareness. The Baal Shem Tov said, exile and redemption begin with the mind. They begin with awareness. When you become aware of your potential, that you are God's ambassador in this world, and therefore you have the power of the one who sent you to fulfill your mission, you're never obscured or confined in shackles. You know that wherever you are is because you were sent there. You're not a victim. You're an ambassador. So if you're in a situation, it's because God sent you there to bring in positivity there. It's all about awareness. Go ahead.
How does Judaism explain the corona?
Okay, how does Judaism explain the corona? I don't know exactly what you mean. The corona, as we know, is an incredible phenomenon. Here you have an invisible virus, invisible to the naked eye, the size of 125 nanometers, which for thousands of years we didn't even know it exists because our naked eye can't observe it until the late 1800s when we developed the microscopic instruments that allowed us for the first time in history to observe viruses and bacteria and microscopic organisms. And here this little invisible creature literally brought the whole world to its knees. It changed the life of every single human being. Every one of 7.7 billion people's lives was affected, transformed, and altered dramatically by the coronavirus. So exactly how it works, the mechanisms of the virus, how it spreads, the ways to fight it, the vaccines, developing antibodies, as you know, as well as I know, scientists, physicians, doctors, researchers are struggling to be able to still gain knowledge in exactly how to curtail and contain this virus. And as you know, nothing is certain yet. There is so much doubt and speculation and uncertainty. Will there be, God forbid, a second wave? Will there be a third wave? I mean, 1918, the great pandemic, there was a second wave and a third wave. That's why we're so careful. So those questions are still out there. We still don't know. I think what Judaism can help us understand is a few things. Number one, to remember, we're not living in a world of chaos. We're living in a world that is ruled and controlled lovingly by God, even if we don't understand it. Number two, to learn from the coronavirus how unified we are. Somebody sneezes in Wuhan, China, and the whole world is affected. Number three, never to underestimate invisible forces that we can't see with our naked eye. Here is a little tiny virus, and it affects the whole world. Number four, never to grow arrogant and pompous and think that in the 21st century, with all of our technology, with all of the amazing progress we have made in science and in physics and in mathematics and in biology and in technology and in cosmology, and especially in medicine and helping human beings live a much better life in terms of longevity and quality and prosperity and success, it's very easy to become arrogant and smug and think, homos deus, we're like God. Who needs God any longer? And I think the coronavirus teaches us humility. It teaches us that we are partners with God. We are ambassadors of God, that we have to be humble. Humility means don't become smug. Realize how a little tiny coronavirus that nobody saw coming suddenly overwhelmed every scientist in the world and every hospital in the world and every doctor in the world. And suddenly our greatest geniuses didn't know if they're coming or they're going. How does that happen? An invisible little creature. Get rid of it. And the answer is because we're people. We're human beings. It behooves us to be humble and to remember that we are messengers of God here in this world, to use our resources, our wisdom, and our talents to make the world a better place. But we should never develop this smugness and narcissism and arrogance, to put things in perspective, to remember who we are, to live humble lives. Humble doesn't mean you're not successful and you're not proud of yourself, but humble means that you always know who you really are and who you could become. I think those are some of the important and valuable perspectives of Judaism on the coronavirus. Let me go to some other questions here. Okay, more practical ways of combating anti-Semitism. Great question. Here's somebody else. I am a young student. I learn history. What can we do to fight anti-Semitism? How do we face it when we get attacked by anti-Semites? What can we do to stay safe? Great question. Wonderful question. Another question. Some countries and colleges in Europe are hotbeds of BDS and anti-Israel. What specific rebuttals can you give us against this new disguised version of anti-Semitism? Some colleges and countries in Europe are hotbeds of BDS. Excellent question. And finally, here's another question. Wasn't the Lubavitcher Rebbe a college and student in university in Europe, first in Berlin and then in Paris, 85 years ago, the 1920s and 1930s, in a time of anti-Semitism, much worse than today? What was his reaction? To hide his Judaism or proclaim it proudly? Did the Rebbe even reach out to ill-informed Jews in Berlin and Paris in the time of anti-Semitism? If so, can't we learn from him? I know that he did not stay in Berlin after 1933 when Hitler came to power. He didn't stay in France when it was overrun. He escaped to America. He left France for America, and he went into his father-in-law's business. If things get worse in Europe, should European Jews also leave for America or for Israel? Wow. Students, good questions, good questions. You challenge your professors also like this, or only me, only Rabbi YY? Great questions. So there's a lot here. The first thing that is so important to emphasize is we are not a nation that surrenders to despair. We are a nation that embraces hope. We're not naive, but we always live with hope. And there's a good reason why we live with hope. As I said in my remarks earlier, because after 4,000 years, we're here, as powerful as ever, as vibrant as ever, growing and increasing, going stronger from day to day, living Jewish lives, spreading Jewish values, and fulfilling our mission as God's ambassadors to change the world and bring it closer to redemption. So when I look at the trajectory of the Jewish future, I say, if you, hundreds of European students, are on here today on this program, learning together, growing together, we have a bright future. And I'm going to give an applause to all of the students in Europe who are joining us here today. Please join me from your quarantine, cocoons, for dozens and hundreds of students who are proud, who are growing, who are learning. Even if you're struggling and you have questions and doubts and uncertainty, that's amazing. Judaism is not a religion that's afraid of questions. You're only afraid of questions when you don't have the answers. When you have answers, you're never afraid of questions. So always ask your questions. And I send you my deepest love, and I applaud you and salute you for the fact that you are young, intellectually curious, inquisitive, eager to know, anticipate to grow. It's incredible. And I know that with you at our helm, our future is not only secure, but our future is in great hands. And with God's grace, you will fill the world with light, with the light of Torah and with the light of mitzvahs. Specifically when it comes to anti-Semitism, I think some practical things to do is, of course, we have to be united. We don't have to agree about everything, but Jews must be united when it comes to the battle of anti-Semitism. Because when we're united, we can achieve incredible things that we cannot achieve alone. That's number one. Number two, we have to enlist the influence and the assistance of all good people around us. This is not a battle Jews should or could fight alone. And they should not, because anti-Semitism doesn't only threaten Jews. It threatens all good people. Anti-Semites begin with Jews. They never end with Jews. Hitler started with the Jews, but ultimately he exterminated millions of his own people and other peoples who were not Jewish. Stalin started with the Jews, but he killed 50 million of his own people outside of Jews, or 40 million. Islamists started the suicide missions against Israel. It started with Israel, but it never ends with Israel. If you look at the countries where anti-Semitism is the most virulent and horrible, take a look at Iran, take a look at Syria. Look how they treat their own people. Forget about Jews. It starts with Jews. It never ends with Jews. So this message must go out. Anti-Semitism threatens Jews. But don't delude yourself that this is a Jewish problem. 9/11 came after the suicide bombings in Israel. It was not an Israeli problem. The bombings in London, in Madrid, in Mumbai, it begins with Israel. It never ends with Israel. So all people of good spirits and good conscience unite to fight bigotry, racism, and hatred, and all of its manifestations. Especially what scares me most is the anti-Semitism of the intellectuals. Cynthia Ozick wrote a brilliant piece in the Wall Street Journal a few days ago about the anti-Semitism of intellectuals. You should look it up. Anti-Semitism doesn't begin with hooligans in the street. It begins with academics, with essayists, with thinkers, with professors, with men of supposedly good renown, men of renown, of good conscience, and of high ideals and values, who nonetheless their teachings and thoughts and articles and essays and books are infiltrated with lies, with myths, and with horrific anti-Semitism, even if it's disguised in sophisticated and noble and humanistic language. We must be united against these forces in every possible and conceivable way and use our influence to get all people of good conscience, people who are dedicated to morality and to seeing civilization thrive with camaraderie and cooperation and a spirit of brotherly and sisterly love, to be able to help us fight this in every possible way. Jews have a lot of influence. They have financial influence. They have literary influence. They have political influence. Don't be embarrassed. Reach out to people of good faith and people of good conscience to unite against this horrible, horrible hatred and evil. That's I think one very important thing, extremely important. And education is important. We have to educate our children. We have to educate our students. Educate yourselves so that you could be spokespeople, spokesmen and spokeswomen for Israel and for the Jewish people. You have to educate yourself. Jews are sometimes so uneducated, they're gullible. They are deceived by people who spread lies and blood libels. I have a friend. He's the Chabad rabbi at Stanford University. His name is Rabbi Dov Greenberg. So he shared with me a few years ago that he was at a lecture, and a student gets up and says, why is Israel doing ethnic cleansing against the Palestinian population? How can Israel be involved in genocide, ethnic cleansing of another group of Palestinians? Great question, right? In front of hundreds of Stanford University Ivy League students, future leaders in America and in the world, future business leaders, future think tank leaders, future political leaders, future leaders in every industry, from entertainment to journalism, from academia to business. And this is the question. How can Israel be involved in ethnic cleansing? The rabbi told me, he looked at the student and he said, I want to ask you another question. So he said, what's the question? And the rabbi said, why did you kill your grandmother? He said, what? Rabbi Greenberg said, why did you kill your grandmother? Why did you murder your grandmother? He says, I murdered my grandmother. He says, well, the facts prove it. He says, how do the facts prove it? He says, is your grandmother dead? He said, yeah, my grandmother is dead. Oh, so she's dead. So she was murdered. You murdered her. Why did you murder her? Everybody, of course, was looking at him in a very strange way. He said, look what I just did. I took the facts, your grandmother is dead. And suddenly you're the murderer of your grandmother. That's a given fact. And now the question is why you murdered her. He said, what I just did to you, you and your colleagues are doing to Israel all the time. You look at certain facts. For example, refugee camps, poverty in Gaza, difficult living conditions in Gaza, 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank in Gaza, many of them struggling. You say, oh, look at this. Your grandmother is dead. Why did you murder her? Why is Israel doing ethnic cleansing? And that's it. You put a fact on the ground, and suddenly the Jews become the target of your hatred based on absolute lies. These are things that we have to educate ourselves and others. I say to you, educate yourself. Educate yourself about the history of the Jewish people, the values of the Jewish people, the ethics of the Jewish people, the heritage of the Jewish people, the story of ancient Israel and modern Israel, so that each and every one of you can become an ambassador and a spokesperson for truth, for clarity, for morality, for decisive authenticity. And don't allow haters to get away with their vicious rhetoric, even if it is communicated in the name of ignorance. These are some thoughts that I am having today. Let's see if there's other questions. Okay, I see some other questions came in, but I think I tried to answer them in my previous answers. But I'll take one last question, unless more, if there's more, the rabbi, tell me. Should we be afraid of anti-Semitism? I don't like the word afraid. We should be concerned. We should be cautious. And most importantly, we should be determined to stand up to it in every possible way. That, yes. Generally, we shouldn't live a life of fear. More importantly is to live a life of courage and determination, knowing what is our mission and how we execute it. That is much more important. The fact that we have fear, we all have fear. Fear is part of the human condition. But I can't allow fear to control me. It's an old saying, you remember, right? Great people are not people who don't have fear. Great people are people who have fear, but they don't allow the fear to dictate their lives. So I say to all of you, of course we have fear. I have fear. You have fear. We have fear. But never allow the fear to dictate the trajectory of your life. Great questions. Okay. Question number one. This student is working on an environment with non-Jews. Should he maintain a very low profile, not to stand out because it's an environment of non-Jews? Okay. It's very hard for me to give advice without really knowing the specifics, the nature of the people who are working there, who runs the company, who's really in charge, and so forth. But I'll tell you from my experience here in the United States of America, with a lot of Jews and a lot of people, is that it's usually the other way around. If the non-Jews are not bigoted haters, but they are fine people who want to live good lives, it's usually the other way around. The more you carry your Judaism on your sleeve with pride and humble dignity, the more they will appreciate you, respect you, and cherish you. And I'll explain to you why. Judaism has values that are extremely enriching and inspiring. Our commitment to family, to marriage. You know, marriage today is a very difficult proposition. People don't want to get married. There's so much divorce. Judaism has developed skills and perspectives that are so conducive to help a marriage stay together if a couple, of course, if they're menschlich, if they're civil, if they're good people. Our commitment to children, to education, to the welfare of children. We're obsessed with children, Judaism. Our commitment to welfare of others, of the poor, of the destitute, our commitment to charity, our commitment to social justice, our commitment to learning. We kiss the Torah scroll. We dance with it. These are very inspiring values and ideals that Gentiles love and benefit from. Judaism has a blueprint that helps all people, Jews and non-Jews, live a great life. We call it the 7 Noahide laws. And therefore I say to you, on the contrary, utilize the opportunity in a kind, respectful, and humble way to be an ambassador of Judaism to the people in your company to help them grow in their own moral and spiritual and psychological lives, even though that's not the reason they hired you. They hired you to do your job, and you should do your job. They didn't hire you as a shliach, as a rabbi in the company. But I'm telling you, between you and me, when you live a life that is dedicated to the sanctification of God's name and Jewish values, usually you will become a source of inspiration. And I think it can even help financially in many ways. Again, I don't know the details, but this is just a general advice and a general perspective. If there are certain things that maybe stimulate misunderstanding or anger, of course, you should be very sensitive and respectful and do things in a wise way that can help unify the company. And I'm going to give one very practical example, which may do miracles. I've given this advice to other people in similar situations, that they make an offer to the boss or the manager, or the one who runs it, that once a week there is lunch delivered to the employees for a half an hour together, and you present an idea, 5-10 minutes, an idea based on the Torah that is morally inspiring. It could be an idea about marriage, an idea about love, an idea about dating, an idea about money, business, education, an idea about racial equality, an idea about peace, an idea about dealing with quarantine. Our Torah has so many enriching ideas. Imagine if there's a weekly session in your company with non-Jews, and you stand up and you say, I want to share an idea of Judaism, 5 minutes, 10 minutes with a little story. You give people what to think about. They take it home. They share it with their families, and it can become a major source of empowerment and inspiration. Again, you have to know the situation and the circumstances, do it with sensitivity and wisdom. But when you think in such terms, you can have an unbelievably powerful, positive impact. In terms of the Hungarian secular 24-year-old Jewish student who wants to become a Talmudist, you want to know if it's too late. Too late? We don't believe in that. Rabbi Akiva is considered the greatest Talmudist in Jewish history. And you know when he started to learn the Jewish alphabet? At the age of 40. It's not only he began to learn Talmud, he didn't know the Hebrew alphabet. You're 24 years old, so you still have 16 years till 40. So I'm not going to tell you to wait 16 years. But Rabbi Akiva, at the age of 40, began his journey of Jewish learning, and he became the greatest sage in Jewish history. He ultimately mentored and taught 24,000 Jewish students. And the entire oral tradition of Torah we have today comes from Rabbi Akiva, who lived and was killed in the 2nd century after the Common Era. Certainly age 24 is not too late for anything. I know it would have been nice if you learned the Bible, the Chumash, at the age of 6 and 7, and Mishnayos at the age of 10, and Talmud at the age of 15. But listen, God decides which family you're born in and how you grow up, and it's not a mistake. You have your mission and your journey and your purpose. But I wouldn't say at all that it's too late. On the contrary, you're young, you're fresh, and if you put your mind to it, you will succeed. And we're looking forward to hear great things from you from Hungary, all the way from Hungary.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Jacobson. If there's any other questions coming up, let me know.
Another question came in. I have very little contact with religious Jews. I try and live a Jewish life with my husband. We have 3 small children. Have you any advice for my journey? Should we move? I have a job that is difficult to leave. I don't want to leave the place I live. I have contact with many non-religious Jews in my town. What would be your advice? It's very hard, again, to give advice without knowing the particular situation. But I think it is very important to think about the future of your own life, your spouse's life, and more importantly, your children's lives. I think you want to be able to give your children a good and thorough and wholesome Jewish education. So I think it would be a good idea to figure out what would be the best way to make sure that your children have a Jewish education, and that you and your husband should also have some connection with a Jewish social life and a Jewish community. On the other hand, there may be tremendous opportunity where you are today financially for your stability and your financial future. And perhaps even there's tremendous opportunity for you and your husband there to serve as leaders to Jews who are more secular and less affiliated. So that may be a great, great opportunity. So I'm sure there are pros and cons that you have to sit and write down, maybe with the help of a mentor or people you trust, confidants. But there's pros and there's cons, and then you really have to see what will be the best for you and your husband and your family. They come first. And then think in terms of your opportunities there financially and also spiritually. And then you'll make the right decision. But the decision should come from a place of empowerment, from a place of clarity. And most importantly, don't only think about the next day or week or month, but really think about the future of your children growing up, the environment, their friends, what type of education they're going to get. Don't just be short-sighted. So it's important to take all of the variables into consideration, and God should help you to make the right decision for your benefit and the benefit of your spouse and the benefit of your family and the benefit of all the people around you, because we're all responsible for each other.
One student reminds us that he did not address what the Rebbe did as a student in Europe.
Oh, it's a great question. What did the Rebbe do as a student in Europe? I'll tell you the truth. Very little information is available of the Rebbe's life during his early years in Europe. Yes, they have made a few books and they collected some fragments of information here and there, but truth be told, after everything we know, much more that we don't know. The Rebbe moved to Berlin in 1928. He was a young man. He was at the time 20. He was born in 1902. So the Rebbe was 26 years old, and he moved to Berlin. He enrolled in university. He started to study there. He married at the end of 1928, December 28. He relocated with his wife back to Berlin. They remained there for a few years. He was studying. In 1933, after Hitler became the Chancellor of Germany, January 33, the Rebbe left to Paris, and he enrolled in university in Paris. He remained in Paris for 8 years. In 1941, after the invasion, after Hitler invaded France, the Rebbe escaped Paris. He fled Paris and ultimately fled Nazi-occupied France, managed to get to Lisbon in Portugal, and took the last boat to the United States, where he arrived in June 1941. The Rebbe, of course, carried his Judaism with a lot of pride and dignity, but he was a first-hand witness to the anti-Semitism and to the anti-Semitic literature in Germany, and much less in France. But in Germany, the Rebbe saw it, the Rebbe observed it. I believe the Rebbe's brother was beaten by the Gestapo. The Rebbe's brother, he had a brother, and his wife once went to a speech that was given, I think, by a senior official in Germany, and the SS, I believe, beat his brother. Either they suspected he was Jewish, or he looked Jewish. But the Rebbe's own brother, his name was Label. He died very young. He was a mathematician in Liverpool. And I believe he was beaten by them. And the Rebbe sometimes in his talks would refer to things that he saw in Berlin. And a very interesting phenomenon, one interesting story I'll leave you with, was told by the Rebbe's wife, Chaya Mushke Schneerson. It's a very interesting story. Ask the last one. Oopsie. What is going on here? Oh. Okay. The Rebbe's wife shared this. When they were living in France and the Nazis took over, they demanded that every Jew should register himself or herself. If you were caught without registration papers, you could be shot on the spot. So Mrs. Schneerson, Rebbetzin Chaya Mushke Schneerson, went to the office of the Gestapo to register herself and her husband. And you had to give a title. So by her husband, she wrote Orthodox. Orthodox. Not only Jews, every citizen had to register himself or herself. So she was a wise woman. She wrote by the Rebbe's name, Orthodox. Of course, what does Orthodox mean? Orthodox could mean an Orthodox Jew. Orthodox can also mean you're part of the Greek Orthodox Church. She wrote Orthodox. She came home and she told the Rebbe what she did. And the Rebbe went down to the offices of the Gestapo and he said that he has to fix something. And he wrote Orthodox Jew. The Lubavitcher Rebbe did not want, even for a moment, that somebody reading his name and his title should think for a moment that he's not a Jew. Even though it wouldn't have any connection to him, he would remain a Jew. And this is maybe crucial to saving your life. But the Rebbe did not want that even for Maris Ayin, even the perception of an SS officer should look at the Rebbe's name and think for a moment that he may not be Jewish. I found this extraordinary. And I can't say this is the calling for every single Jew, but it does teach you about the Lubavitcher Rebbe and his commitment to the Jewish people and to God. I guess that made him the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And his wife marveled at this. She shared the story in the 1980s with the Chabad librarian, a man named Rabbi Shalom Ber Levin, my friend, who runs the Chabad library in Brooklyn. And she shared the story with him. I heard it from him. That's how I know the story. But this is an incredible, incredible story. It tells you how the Rebbe thought. So you ask if the Rebbe carried his Judaism with pride in the 1930s and 40s in Berlin and France. Here you have a story. And I think the relevance to us is really to teach us that each one of us in our own unique and inimitable way should never be embarrassed by our history, by our faith, by our heritage. You have been given a gift of eternity, a gift of stability, an anchor in a world of confusion, chaos, and uncertainty. Hold on to the gift. Cherish it, celebrate it, and in the right time, bequeath it to your loved ones. I love you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Jacobson. As this lecture was produced beautifully by the rabbi, this was actually so beyond time, quality, and quantity. We really appreciate it. And this was for sure empowering and inspiring and obviously educating. This was produced together by the ECJS and the Mehut organizations. We hope as the ECJS organization to come back with the events and meet all together again. As of now, we have to work with the virtual community that we have now. And as the Mehut...
You're doing great. You're doing great. Also, I see some more questions are coming in. So let me tell the students, if anybody has a question, or it may even be a personal question, and you may not be comfortable to share it here, you can email me directly, and God willing, I will try to respond to you. Rabbi YY at theyeshiva.net. That's Rabbi YY at the Yeshiva YESHIVA.net. If you wish, you can email me directly, Rabbi YY at theyeshiva.net, and bli neder, God willing, I will try to answer your question. And thank you for giving me the privilege of addressing such a distinguished and special group of our students in Europe. God bless you all.
Chazak Baruch. We will keep on also with the Mehut weekly classes. You mentioned about the Medani, the education. This is all what's happening with 200 students across Europe having a weekly class with their own rabbis. So we will keep it up, and hopefully the Corona crisis will empower us even more for the future. Thank you, Rabbi Jacobson, and thank you all. Have a great night.
My love and blessings to all of you. Stay healthy, stay proud, and stay inspired and empowered.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.